Hey gang, it is May 7th, 2018, and this is my daughter's 2007 Kia Sportage. I've done some other videos on this car, and she was telling me that the brakes were making some noise up front, and she is home from college right now, and this is the opportunity for me to do some maintenance on it and give it a good bath, that's for sure. Looks like the birds have been having their way with it, so I'm going to go through the process of replacing the front brake pads on this vehicle. And what I plan to do is use Wagner TQ, which is a ceramic product, and there's the part number. These are from Advanced Auto Parts, and you know, they're $45, $46. Pretty nice kit there. So I'm going to go through the steps of doing that. Of course, I will jack it up and put a jack stand under it and get that wheel off, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so to start with, I'm not worried about changing the rotors at this point. They're showing a little bit of wear on them, but there's no shaking whenever she hits the brakes, or when I've driven it, haven't seen any shaking, so I'm not worried about the rotors. This is only for changing the brake pads. Now, to change the pad, it's really not that complicated. I'm going to remove these two bolts here. There's one up here on the top, and there's another one down here. Both the same size, they're 14 millimeter. And I will break those loose using a mallet. I don't like to abuse my hands. And then the second part of that is, internally there's a second, looks like a bolt head. And basically you can put a 17 millimeter on that, and that is what the main bolt turns into. So it'll rotate, but if you hold it still with a wrench, you can get that loose. Hopefully I won't have to do that. It'll just break loose and the bolt will come out with no problem. So let me reset the camera and show you what I'm doing. Now again, I want to break this bolt loose, and of course you're looking at it opposite. To turn that loose, it's going to have to rotate this direction, which appears clockwise from the front, but it's counterclockwise. So I'm going to tap that with a mallet, break that loose, and that turns nice. And I'll do the same on the bottom. Living in the South has its advantages. So now I'm going to take those two bolts out. And there's no Loctite or anything on these. Just simple standard bolts. Now with those two bolts out, the caliper should come off pretty easily. If it doesn't, you can take a screwdriver and get in behind the bracket and the caliper and work that off. So now I'm going to take off these pads, and yep, not much left of that one. And when I do these, I like to lay the pads just as they come off of the vehicle. So I will lay this one to the outside of the rotor and this one to the inside. Now the only difference is they're the same pad, but the inner one here has a scraper on it, and that's your indicator. Whenever your pads are getting thin, it scrapes on the rotor. So with those removed, now what I want to do is I'll take either pad will work, and I'm going to put it up here in the caliper. See if I can show you that. And I'm going to use this tool. Now this is just a simple compressor. I got a red wasp flying around here. This is a compressor tool for pushing the piston back into the caliper. Now you put the pad in there so you have something to press against, and then you just compress that in. You tighten this up slowly, and it's going to push that piston back into the caliper. And what that also does is it pushes the fluid from the caliper back towards your master cylinder. So when I do this, I also monitor my reservoir, because if this has been serviced at any time when the pads were thin, then there's going to be extra fluid in there, and what will happen is it'll actually push up and try to come out the top. So I'm going to monitor that. I can see the fluid. You can wiggle it a little bit and see the fluid, and it's really low, so I shouldn't have to worry about it at this point. You can also, if you want to, loosen this cap, and it relieves a little bit of air pressure, and just let it sit up on top. Now, as I said, we'll continue to compress this piston back into the caliper. And once it bottoms out, you don't want to push very hard at that point. You can see it going in and getting flush with the face of the caliper here, and so you don't want to be overly aggressive and force that thing any tighter than it should be. So you take this old pad out of the way, and now you've got clearance for the new pads. And all I'm going to do, make sure this is clean. There's nothing really going on here, just a little bit of brake dust, but everything is fine. I'm going to open up the new pads, and then it's a matter of just matching them up. As you can see here, I saw that red wasp flying around. This will be the replacement for the inner pad because it has a scraper on it. So then it's just a matter of putting that in place, lining it up, and then the outer doesn't have any scrapers at all. So again, just line it up, and then we'll rotate the caliper back in place, making sure you don't twist the hose. Now if you wanted to, these little sliders here, these are designed to go in and out so that as the brake pads get thinner, this moves with the caliper. But this one is fine. You can pull these out, clean them up, and re-grease them, but mine are fine. This thing's moving really easily. Yeah, both top and bottom. So I'm not going to do that. In different parts of the U.S. or world, you may have more corrosion problems. Here in the South, things are usually pretty clean, and you don't have to deal with much of that. So I'll put the bolts back in. Now this time I'm going to use that 17mm and hold that one from turning and turn the wrench or turn the bolt against it. And I'm not putting enough torque that I want to snap the thing off, but obviously you want it nice and tight. And that's really all there is to it. Pretty simple. And now what I'll do is I will press the brake pedal down several times and tighten up or put more fluid back into the caliper, and then I'll go work and do the other side. Since I mentioned having excess fluid in the reservoir, I thought I should also mention how I remove it. Typically I use these simple syringes. I think you can get these at pharmacies, maybe even a supply house like Tractor Supply or something like that, but I've had this one for quite a while. Basically, you just go in through the opening, pull out some fluid, and then I deposit it in an old oil bottle, which I hang on to. So that's just an easy way to remove that excess fluid. So that's it. Pretty simple job. I think that was some good information for you. And I would recommend at this point also that you go ahead and check the air pressure in your tires. You know, check your light bulbs and stuff like that while you're doing this sort of thing, and that'll keep you safe and on the road longer. So that's it, and as usual, thanks for watching.